talked about it in letters, and we talked about it on the phone. But how you really feel about it, I don't really know.
What's your take on Cassavetes? 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 Misogynist, genius, misogynist, genius, misogynist, genius, misogynist, genius. What's your take on Cassavetes? What's your take on Cassavetes? What's your take on?
Welcome to There's Sometimes a Buggy Irresponsible Opinions About Classic Film. I'm Elise.
I'm Dave. This week, it's the Hollywood Studios Year by Year. We are now in 1934.
The Year of the Code.
Yes, at some point during this year, the code will begin to be enforced, but not to either of these films. These are Paramount. We're going to be talking about Cecil B. DeMille's Four Frightened People and Mitchell Leisen's Behold My Wife.
So these, still feel a little bit like pre-codes, but we'll see as we move further into the studio era. We're kind of going to be entering a new mode, a new time of filmmaking.
A time in which suggestiveness has to go even further underground, and certain types of plot developments just can't happen, but they can definitely happen in these films.
Well, we'll talk about that more when we get to Behold My Wife. Yeah, actually, even in Four Frightened People, there's not only the typical Cecil B. DeMille nudity tease, but there is also...
There's actual
There's a
extramarital
divorce.
sex.
Extramarital, well, implied.
No, he says, I've given you grounds for divorce.
True, but we don't see the sex.
Well, no, of course they don't show
we don't even
a
see anything close to the sex.
No, but it's definitely implied they've been having sex.
That's true. That's correct. And there is a divorce, and, even divorce is something that doesn't often happen in code films.
No, although that can happen.
Usually if people are getting remarried, but other than that, it usually isn't an important plot point.
Blanket disclaimer for both of these films, they each, in their own ways, deal with very twitchy subjects in terms of race relations.
Twitchy? Is that just something you've coined? Oh, that's your own... No?
No, that comes from The Twilight Zone, which is a fun podcast where they went through every episode of The Twilight Zone. Whenever they came to anything that might land them into any kind of trouble, just discussing it, they didn't really want to talk about. They'd just say, this is a very twitchy
Because I guess cringe is already in different use, and might even be triggering for some people. Oh, we've seen... Okay, well, first of all, we've done movies that are far, far more racist.
Yes, but
than these movies are, hopefully self-consciously, notably Murders in the Rue Morgue. These are quite sophisticated films on race for their time. Not quite at the level of, I think Bitter Tea of General Yen pretty much stands alone in its analysis of a certain kind of racial prejudice, i.e. not against Black Americans. American films have obviously by far the hardest time with that. But it does have implicit analysis of white supremacy. But these were pretty good. And even where they do get twitchy, it's at least in a way that's interesting to think about.
The best you can say about them is that they are products, certainly Behold My Wife anyway, is a product of a white supremacist society that is beginning to examine some of its preconceived notions, but all within the context of soul searching on the part of white creators and white actors. And obviously, it does make a difference when everyone involved in creating something is white. Even if they are starting to think about things, this is not bamboozled. In any event, that's just all to say that if we ever sound like we are impressed by anything these films are doing, we understand that it is all being done within very circumscribed parameters.
Again, they're films not just made by white people, they're also films made for white people.
even though many non-white people would have seen them, but
they're made for the white gaze, and they are made to accommodate and examine white fantasies. That's the way race is used in these films.
Yeah.
So, and we are white people, so we probably have white fantasies, so we are probably the correct people to discuss these films as such, but maybe not the correct people to criticize them.
No, probably not. But we're here, and we're going to start with Four Frightened People. So this is our second Cecil B. DeMille film in our series.
I think I'm ready to declare myself a Cecil B. DeMille fan after this and Sign of the Cross. This far exceeded my expectations, and also wasn't at all what I was expecting.
Oh, good.
It was better than what I was expecting, but not what I was expecting. I didn't know it was going to be a comedy. It is, at least for the first half.
Well, whenever you've got Claudette Colbert involved, she's going to get some comedy.
Yeah, but I mean, everybody is a comic character initially in this.
Sure, that's true. Oh yeah, we should say, initially it was released at 95 minutes. Doing a little bit of looking around, I saw that UCLA did show the full 95-minute version a few years ago. That version has not made it onto home video, so we watched the DVD that was part of a Cecil B. DeMille set that came out about 10 years ago. It's a nice looking transfer, but it's only 78 minutes. And what is missing, according to the few little pieces I read online, is mostly just backstory that gets kind of summarized in a weird extended exposition intro to the film with the cameo.
Yeah, I was like,
credits.
Wow, Cecil B. DeMille is on a wavelength all by himself here. This is kind of cool, but I don't see anybody else doing this.
It's got the Warner Brothers style cameo credits,
but with titles.
Little backstories to each person of the Four Frightened People.
Let's talk about some of the creators. The cinematographer is Carl Strauss.
A genius.
He is. We mentioned him before. He did Sign of the Cross, and he did the magnificent and magnificent looking Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Mamoulian, and this movie looks absolutely fantastic. It would be wonderful to see it on the big screen.
And he did Sunrise.
Oh, well, yeah. I neglected to mention that. Did he do City Girl as well?
I don't think so.
No? It's based on a novel by E. Arnaud Robertson, who is an English novelist, critic, and broadcaster. She was responsible for... Well, Wikipedia tells us that she never actually went to Malaya.
Okay.
And she
well,
was
neither did the
responsible...
film. The film tells us that they actually shot on location, but not in Malaya, on Mauna Loa.
Where is that?
Hawaiian Islands.
Oh, so it did say that, because, Wikipedia says it was shot in Hawaii.
Yeah.
She's responsible as a film critic for a phrase that I have heard before, attached to Bette Davis in Dangerous. I think Bette Davis would probably have been burned as a witch if she had lived 200 or 300 years ago. She gives a curious feeling of being charged with power which can find no ordinary outlet. It's a very good film criticism line. I wish I could write like that. I found a summary on Abe Books. It says here, the novel, the characters lost in a Malay jungle are picked off one by one. Marginally fantasy and philosophic as the characters, with all glosses of civilization dropping away, reveal the true nature of humanity as primitive and violently tribal. The novel is by turns gruesome and bitingly satiric.
So it's Lord of the Flies.
Yeah, but
That's nothing to do with this film.
It's nothing like the film that we watched. It does, however, sound intriguing. Author was known as a comic writer, so I guess the mixture of tones was present in the novel, but sounds like her tone was a lot darker than what we get here.
I guess so.
And also, apparently, according to Wikipedia, it was a box office disappointment.
Well, I guess the public were waiting for another Sign of the Cross from DeMille.
This is pretty tame, not only in terms of any naughtiness that happens or is suggested, tame compared to Sign of the Cross, and also just in terms of...
Well, it's intimate.
In terms of an adventure story, like not a lot of really big scares happen, but it is philosophic.
Yeah.
That it is.
What people were starting to depend on from DeMille is the epic, right? So Sign of the Cross, and then he does stuff like The Crusades and Union Pacific. These are giant cast of thousands films that go over 2 hours, and this is almost trolling the audience by saying, oh, there's 4 characters. But there aren't 4 characters, there are more than 4 characters, but if you go by the title...
There are 4 white people who get lost in a Malay jungle, that is true. It almost seems halfway to Borzegi's Strange Cargo.
Yeah, I mean, it's not nearly as good as Strange Cargo, but...
But in its philosophic tone and its evocation of a sometimes frightening paradise.
It does not measure up to Strange Cargo, but that's one of my favorite films. There's no way it could for me.
No, I'm not talking about quality. I'm talking about kind of what it's attempting. DeMille is somebody who, for all of his weirdness and prurience, certainly was interested in thinking about religion.
Yes, he definitely was.
Anyway, I like this a lot.
It's a great role for Claudette Colbert.
Sure, you can really see what Kendall was talking about here with her having the instincts of a boulevard farceur.
Yeah.
In her broadly characterized spinster who loosens up in the course of her adventure. Not only that, but becomes the hero of the story.
This is the ultimate girl takes off her glasses and becomes...
Sheena, Queen of the Jungle is what they said in that Abe Books
right.
synopsis.
Herbert Marshall, here still in his romantic lead phase before he becomes the discarded husband of Bette Davis.
Well, he's kind of halfway there.
Yeah, but it pulls him back from the brink.
He is a discarded husband, but yeah, he gets saved to be the leading man. And you see that that's where it's leading, because the He-Man adventurer...
It's William Gargan.
Is being thrown under the bus as a caricature of the worst instincts of civilization.
And then Mary Boland has an awesome role as well.
Oh, she's the most problematic thing in the movie, though.
Of course, yeah, but the actress is giving a great performance.
A very good comic performance, yeah. As the one native character that we really get to know, we have Leo Carrillo, who is Castilian Spanish.
Right.
So, yeah, there you go.
He played any kind of Italian or Greek.
Any kind of non-WASP character.
He was indispensable in 30s Hollywood for that kind of thing.
And he is also doing a broadly comic part very well. At what? They're all comic characters, and then he gets a really problematic pathos death, sacrificed so the white people are preserved, and etc.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
Oh, we'll talk about it all. Alright, so it starts off with they're all on this cruise trying to get... Well, they're not on a cruise. They're on a cruiser trying to get back to New York.
Everyone has their own reasons for needing to be in New York on a certain date, and now they're not going to make it. There's a plague, bubonic plague, on the ship.
Yikes, if you want to know about something that's worse than COVID, try the bubonic plague.
No, let's not try it. William Gargan, he's an internationally famous war reporter and man of adventure on the radio. Probably the only useful thing he does in the whole movie is he notices the signs of bubonic plague, which are being completely kept under wraps by the ship's personnel because they don't want to panic. They hijack a little boat going to try to sneak off the ship and get to anywhere that doesn't have bubonic plague.
Yeah, somehow Mary Boland gets involved with this. Do they just want her along because she can speak, I guess, Malay?
Of course, that all happens before the curtain goes up, so you just get the sense that he notices it, and maybe those are his dinner companions, Herbert Marshall and Mary Boland.
Let it be stated that I don't even know if Malay is a language.
Yeah, probably it's a constellation of languages spoken in that area.
She seems to be able to... Well, there must be a common language people are speaking, because she seems to be able to communicate with different tribes.
Not very well, but well enough to be understood. So they're pirates, basically. That's how the movie begins, and Claudette Colbert is being held under wraps by Herbert Marshall because she may scream. She's not part of this. She didn't know anything about it. It's just that she happened to observe, and they had to grab her and take her along because she was gonna say, hey, people are holding someone at gunpoint and stealing a boat.
Right, and for the first half of the movie, Herbert Marshall and...
William Gargan, they
spend the whole first half of the movie telling Claudette Colbert that they don't even consider her a human being. Certainly not a woman.
No.
So they had no interest in taking her along at all.
No, definitely not. She's got glasses on, and her hair is kind of pulled tight against her noggin.
She's acting in a mousy way.
Yes.
She's a geography teacher.
Yes.
And
that's the most disgusting thing, according to Herbert Marshall.
Yep. And he himself is a shy chemist.
Yes.
Who's also a browbeaten husband at home. Yeah, that's our cast of characters.
So Mary Boland, we didn't mention.
Yeah, because we'd have to really get into it once we mention what she's doing.
Well, no, they tell us right away. She is a rich woman who is kind of a globetrotter, but her one mission in life these days is to lower the birth rate across the world.
And of course, they don't specify that refers to poor people, and often racialized poor people.
She's a Thomas Malthus type.
Yeah, and these are the people who are, for cultural, sometimes economic, but largely cultural reasons, still having large families to this day.
She wants to put a stop to that.
Yeah, so I'm not sure how the film feels about this, but I feel very queasy about it.
Yeah, well, when we get to her big moment, we'll have to talk about that.
Feminist imperialist moment?
Yeah.
Oh, the screenplay, incidentally, we didn't mention.
Oh, Lenore Coffey was involved.
Yeah, I assume she's responsible for keeping the dialogue lively. She's a 30s screenwriter that we enjoy. And the other screenwriter is Bartlett Cormack. Apparently known for working with Howard Hughes and Cecil B. DeMille. Okay.
Some fun playmates.
He worked on Cleopatra. Yeah, nothing
Well,
here.
Fury.
1931 front page. Is Fury good?
Fury is one of the best movies. It's a Fritz Lang movie about lynching.
Oh, right. Okay, how much did he contribute to that? Let's see.
I thought Norman Krasna wrote that screenplay, but
well,
maybe...
it's attributed to 3 people. Krasna, Lang, and Cormack are attributed as the writers on Wikipedia.
Well, that's a great movie.
All right, well, 2 good screenwriters on 4 frightened people.
They do get to land. Unfortunately, when they get there, these guys are pretty clueless. The village is on fire.
Well,
and
it's Gargan who suggests that, it's probably some tribal ceremony.
Yeah, but nobody challenges him. He's the expert. They don't say, that's ridiculous. They're just like, oh, I guess he knows.
Yeah, well, right off the bat, there's a lot of undercutting of expectation of this type of narrative. We find out that they are quite sensibly burning houses full of people who've died of cholera.
Yeah, so cholera may be slightly less dangerous than bubonic plague, but also terrible, and nobody wants to get it. And they are doing what they can to stop the spread.
Is that something that's contagious by touch? I thought it was spread through water.
I think it's spread mostly through water, but if you have to burn houses, then it must be.
Yeah, presumably.
They can't stay there. They have to go to the other side of the island where they can get a ship out to the United States. They can't coast along the side on their little dinghy or boat because there are mangrove swamps. So, they have to go too far out to sea. They would be wrecked almost immediately if they tried that. So they have to cross the interior of the island to the other side. All of this is imparted to them by the man who will become their guide, Montague.
Yes, who is proud of being the most white or the most British or both of the natives.
Wearing a tie and a Windsor knot, pulling out a lot of vocabulary. Some of it is malapropism, some of it is right on target. He's just, I guess...
I didn't notice a lot of malapropism, was there?
Yeah.
Alright. Well, it wasn't too cringeworthy, because I didn't actually notice it.
Well, he calls them brothers and women brothers and stuff.
That's true, but I don't know, that was pretty mild. As comic malapropisms attributed to Black Americans in screenplays throughout the 30s and 40s, that's nothing.
No, that's true.
In fact, some comic actors, that was their whole shtick, which one has mixed feelings about.
Very bad time.
David O. Selznick, writing for Hattie McDaniel.
Montague, though, is a very lovable character.
Yes, he is. But he is fucked up by white supremacy. Deeply fucked up.
Maybe the most interesting character.
Proud of being white, which he pretty much correctly thinks is a cultural thing, right? Not a racial thing. I mean, he's accurate about that. But he is inaccurate in thinking that other people will also believe that he's white.
Right, and that becomes his downfall.
Yeah.
We won't get there for quite a while. So he's with them for most of the film. Unfortunately, as lovable as he is, he's not really that competent a guide. And this was all part of...
No, but the film doesn't, other than stupid Gargan, the film itself doesn't seem to blame him very hard for this.
No, but I think that Montague is kind of echoing Gargan, the blowhard expert there. He also can't admit that he doesn't know things. So he has to pretend like he's crossed the interior of the island plenty of times. He knows how to do it. When they get lost, he finally admits that, no, I don't know where we're going.
He doesn't know nothing about birthing no babies? Is that the stereotype we're dealing with?
No, I think it's more like the Gargan stereotype, right? The know-it-all. And it's a sign of weakness to admit that you don't know. Because they have a couple of occasions, right, where they could have asked some of the tribes that they come across further inland. Montague can talk to them, and he doesn't, and he says, a white man can't do that.
So you think it's because he's
don't ask for directions.
Because
like
he's
the guy driving
trying
on...
to be a white man.
Yes,
that's the problem. He's
that's
trying
what
to
he
be
says.
superior.
He says exactly that. You get to a gas station on the highway, you don't ask how to get somewhere.
Because
You
white
just
people know everything.
tough it out.
But our protagonist is Claudette Colbert, for sure.
Absolutely.
Even, like, right from the beginning. Before she becomes the hero. Action hero.
We're sort of let in on what's going on with her. She's in love with William Gargan. She was in love with him before she ever met him because of his romantic personality on the radio, and she thinks it's incredible that she happens to be thrown together with this wonderful man. Of course, nothing comes of that.
Right off the bat, there is Cecil B. DeMille prurience around the fact that this woman is a virgin. Probably she's a spinster, right? Or on her way to being an old maid, as they say. She is worried about sleeping with the men, and they keep insisting that there's nothing to worry. It's like an inverted prurience.
Actually, she's not worried about that at first. Mary Boland is the one that brings that up, saying, you know, we're two women, we gotta stick together, we're alone with these men, and hopefully they'll be gentlemen, but we can't count on that. We have to be ready to back each other up. And then Claudette Colbert is kind of knocked onto that track.
But the joke is that nobody has, at this point, any sexual interest in anybody.
Right, they're all tired and
well, no, they're not.
and...
Also, they're just, nobody is even a potential romantic target other than Gargan.
Yeah, Herbert Marshall is just a grumbly, old before his time man, and Mary Boland is middle-aged. So that puts her out of the running.
Rules her out.
Claudette Colbert is a schoolmarm.
Yeah, but the film's going to invert these values. It's revealed to us after this night in the jungle where this question of sex has been raised. We get to see Claudette Colbert with her hair, like it looks like in no other movie, spread out in this Victorian fashion. There's always, in these 30s DeMille films, they're still filled with the frissons of the silent era. So she gets this her long Victorian hair coursing down her form, and her glasses are off, and of course she looks gorgeous. So it's revealed to us that she is in fact sexual before it's revealed to the men.
True.
And it's even implausible that it takes them that long to notice it, because since she ends up, after being frightened in the jungle, she ends up sleeping between them that very night.
All of this, Cecil B. DeMille is one of the best at getting at the contradictions and just the insanely disgusting aspects of gender roles under patriarchy, because he can just go, because he believes in these things so fervently and wants to think about them in ways that most people would just prefer not to. He can show us that to be a woman under the system, you have to insist that you not be treated as a sexual object, but also be deeply offended if you are not treated as a sexual object. It's like just no win for anyone, but it's the kind of thing that could drive someone like Claudette Colbert insane very quickly.
She does get fed up pretty quickly in the course of this adventure. Yeah, Cecil B. DeMille, it's interesting. He's really a movie feminist, like one of those 30s director feminists. I wasn't expecting that from him at all. I mean, he's just very clearly on the heroine's side in all of this, even, well, permitting her to be a sex object as well.
He rose to prominence originally with all of his Gloria Swanson movies in the 20s.
Yeah, these American silent movie directors were very good on the women, not so good on race, very good on the women. You know, Lillian Gish, Mary Pickford, everybody.
A deeply socially and politically, in every other way, conservative man, certainly by the 30s.
Yeah, but those men seem to have no trouble representing women heroically in fiction and being very good at analyzing gender, as you say, in fiction.
Yeah, because they're obsessed with it. Several encounters, fairly harrowing encounters that are intermingled with the comedic scenes of travel through the jungle. There are real dangers here.
Yeah, they're on a budget with those dangers, though, so there's no frightening encounters with any large animals. And luckily nobody just dresses up in a gorilla suit.
Oh, God. Well, the water buffalo...
It's all pretty subtle.
That scene was great. They were like, oh, it's just a cow. And Montague was like, no, it is not just a cow. Better stay away from that thing. It can charge you and trample you very quickly.
Yeah, but there's no demonstration.
All we get is some aggressive posturing from the water buffalo, and they choose the better part of valor. Even William Gargan, who is talking very tough for a moment there.
So the bridge playing night is the first night where things get a little dicey with the wildlife.
Yes, the cobra.
And it felt very Val Lewton in that so much more is suggested than shown until the end there with the cobra. And then they keep dropping their cards and putting their hands under the whatever little shelter and not knowing that there's a cobra down there.
The cobra stretches its neck out towards them and just misses each time, and then finally gets fed up and decides to appear right next to Claudette Colbert. Gargan pulls out his pistol he's been dying to use and shoots it.
So this is his first, well, this time effective use of the pistol. Later it won't be so effective.
No.
So he's committed a heroic act, and she's kind of like a Jane Austen heroine in that she first goes for the guy who actually represents all the wrong things, but he's like a hero in a book. So she is attracted to him first, and she has to become educated about what to really like in a man. That precipitates her move, and ultimately the initial climax and turning point of the movie, because that's when she decides to try to help him out by putting his shoes by the fire at night.
Yeah, she would love to thank him by throwing her arms around him and kissing him, but he has no interest in that. Quickly downplays any of her paeans to his heroism, so instead, while he's sleeping, she wants to dry out his shoes.
And his socks. And having seen Bringing Up Baby, I knew how this was going to go. I knew this was a Susan Vance type move.
Well, she doesn't keep watch over them. She doesn't actually put them in the fire like Katharine Hepburn does, but she puts them too close, and by the morning, they are toast. So he is really incensed by this.
He has a tantrum.
I don't know, that's valid. I would be pretty pissed off, too, if my footwear was burned up.
Sure, but once she admits to what she's done, he doesn't kind of back off and try to be understanding of her motives or anything.
No, he really loses it on her, and that's it. She just decides she's leaving. She can't stand them. She'd rather go by herself through the forest than continue on with them. Here, Herbert Marshall differentiates himself by saying
for the first time.
No, that was not cool what you did.
You've been treating her like shit this whole time, and,
yeah.
She was just trying to help.
Mary Boland actually was trying to do some pimping all along, too. Like, she has advised Gargan that Claudette Colbert is already in love with him, and he should just try to be nice to her, for God's sake. And he just won't do it.
Nope. She's not the right type. So that's when we have our encounter with another tribe for the first time.
Yeah, so she goes through the forest by herself. She loses her glasses here, and we're starting to get the
we know where this
transformation.
Is going. Never needed those glasses.
No, she never needed them. It was
somehow she was seeing with glasses that she didn't need. I don't know how that works, but that great moment in Now Voyager where Claude Rains crushes. Okay, I might be misremembering this, but I remember him crushing Charlotte's glasses and saying, "Remember, the doctor said you don't need those anymore." She's just been keeping them on to keep herself sexually shielded. So it's a trope anyway.
Yeah, it is. Now, has there ever been a medical case like this? Because everyone I know who had glasses when they were kids still needs them as adults. You don't outgrow bad eyesight.
Maybe they were overdiagnosing bad eyesight.
She runs afoul of an interior tribe, and they've got her, and her friends, or sort of friends, actually decide, mainly at the instigation of Herbert Marshall, that they have to go look for her.
This is already a screenplay that is playing against tropes that must be at least a century old at this point, and we ourselves are all still familiar with them, because, if you run across a tribe in a jungle when you're a bunch of helpless white people, you assume they're going to be cannibals, take you away, and suspend you over a fire.
Yeah.
Right, and of course, this is not exactly what happens. These are rational people who own the territory, and you have got to pay them a fee.
Yeah, so they want a big sack of rice in exchange for allowing transit through their area.
And they want a guarantee for this.
Everyone assumes that Claudette Colbert will be the ransom.
Because they assume that these men want to rape her.
Right.
Because she's already getting a little bit sexy with her hair down and no glasses.
But no, they insist that they want Mary Boland because their custom is that the ransom should weigh exactly the same.
First of many fat jokes tonight.
Yeah, unfortunately. A big, big sack. And Mary Boland...
Did you just call her a big, big sack?
No, big sack of rice is required.
You implicitly called her a big, big sack.
Here, Mary Boland shows us some pretty deep pathos. Like,
that was some amazing
out of
pathos.
nowhere. She's
when
like,
she decides to sacrifice herself. You know, other than her problematic politics, she really is a pretty awesome character. She seems really silly at first, but she's actually pretty cool.
yeah, she is very gamely going through all of this. She doesn't complain about anything. She's carrying a dog.
Dog never even barks. Also, doesn't he disappear or something?
No, he's always there.
Okay. Never even. That's a really well-behaved dog. We're
Yeah.
just in shock.
She is going to have to be left behind, and they've got 1 moon, 1 month to get to the coast and get some rice and ship it back so that she can be released. Otherwise, they will kill her, they say.
They say, but someone does. Well, actually, it's Gargan who says they're bluffing. So who knows? Good
Montague
idea to do
says,
this.
no, they're not bluffing. They are given safe passage. That doesn't actually get them anywhere. They still have to hack their way through and figure it out. They don't have a map, and Montague is useless.
Yeah. Does the romance start after Montague dies? The romance plot? I think so.
No, it's already starting.
Is it already starting? Is the waterfall stuff next? Now we basically turned into the Smurfs. It really is proto-screwball comedy in that everybody's quite childlike, even in their sexy relations to each other. By the Smurfs, I mean now she is the only woman in the world, and they are both in awe of her.
Well, that happens, yeah, when they see her taking a shower.
Well, they already are crushing on her at that point, and then they see her taking the shower. Her getting angry. Does she get the gun? She gets the gun at this point, too, when it
Yeah.
gets dropped. So her getting angry and being an action hero and telling them off seems to be as much responsible for their new interest in her as her physical transformation.
Shows some assertiveness. She tells them that she's a descendant of John Paul Jones. She's got more valor in her bloodline than any of them, and they better start listening to her. She actually does take charge of the expedition at that point.
And when they're tied up by the tribesmen, she also tells them off and says they're just like little boys in her class.
That's true. Obviously, she has these skills already. She just has not been using them in this context. If you want to control teenage boys, you have to do something. And she shows that she's up to that task.
Alright, so then we get the naked waterfall, and then we get Herbert Marshall.
Well, there's a mischievous chimpanzee.
Yeah, the chimp.
I don't think chimpanzees live in Asia at all. But
it's just a melee of jungles here at
Yeah.
this point. Including, at the end, it looked like they were in a sort of garden of Aztec ruins. Also, wrong continent, but...
well, those could be...
You think those could be Buddhist?
Could be
They
Buddhist
look
temples.
pretty Aztec to me, but I mean, I'm no expert.
No,
So.
no, we're not. Chimpanzee runs off with her clothes. They get a few of them back, but not all of them.
Chimp is also a bit of a transvestite. Does put on her high heels.
But we don't know what gender the chimp is.
That's true. I guess maybe the chimp just wants her clothes. But the chimp is kind of a voyeur.
The chimp is acting like Billy Barty in a Busby Berkeley movie.
Yes. We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. So they manage to reclaim a few of her clothes, and she borrows some parts of the men's clothes to cobble together a sarong.
Well, she makes a gorgeous gown, actually.
Yeah.
Like, none of this is... Please understand, none of this is meant to be remotely fucking realistic. This
No.
is a fantasy movie.
Yeah.
So she looks more gorgeous than ever at the end of this.
Now, every scene she
She's
gets
her own
better looking.
fairy
yes.
godmother who's made herself a beautiful fantasy jungle gown.
That's sort of playing on the same kind of tropes that you got in Forbidden and you'll get again in Now Voyager. She went on this trip in a desire to have the kind of adventure that happens to people in movies and novels. It didn't happen until the plague struck. So she was headed back home after a failure.
Yeah.
And now this opportunity lands in her lap.
Yeah, and she tells them that she's going to do all the things she's ever dreamt of doing before she dies because she doesn't think they're really getting out of this. So then Herbert Marshall is trying to give her clothes back or something. I know what happens?
It's before
What's going on?
before Gargan reclaims the clothes,
Yes.
and Marshall thinks she's going to catch pneumonia if she stays in the waterfall any longer. He just goes in and drags her out of there naked.
Yeah, which is very much a pre-code thing to do.
Yeah.
In fact, I've never seen anything like this in a movie of this period.
Now, we don't really see her nude body on camera
Yeah, we see
in his arms.
a lot less of it than we do in the milk bath. the sign of the cross.
But even to imply that he's carrying a naked Claudette Colbert
Exactly.
around is not something you will see in most movies.
He also blurts out that she's beautiful as he's looking down at her in his arms before putting her down.
He can't handle it.
So at the point at which Gargan mistakenly goes for the clothes instead of the naked woman, you know he's out of the running. That's not the right move, man. You're a chump of a chimp.
Well, you can't use a gun getting a naked woman out of the waterfall, and that's what he likes to do.
Yeah, okay. No, you use your gun after.
Basically, they've fallen in love now.
Yes.
It doesn't spend a lot of time establishing that.
Because of the way the movie treats Gargan from the beginning, I assumed that somehow Marshall and Colbert were going to end up as a couple, although it's very not obvious until this moment how that's going to happen.
Yeah, of course, Herbert Marshall is a movie star. William Gargan really isn't. I mean, he's...
Well, not just that, but he's a jackass. He's the movie's jackass.
Yeah,
He's
but
the fall guy.
audiences would have known, okay, those
I
are the
see.
two movie stars in
Okay.
the movie.
Sure, all right.
So I don't think it surprised anyone.
Surprised me a little.
I guess really the next major scene is when they encounter
In-
the third tribe.
Yeah, they're in this land of bamboo. It's like, these are like different fantasy
Video game levels.
Or I was going to say like Wizard of Oz landscapes, but okay.
Here, we're told by Montague that this particular group, they like to steal things from people, so Gargan wakes up and finds things are gone. They do not hurt white men, maybe because they've been subject to genocidal European invasions before.
Well, what happens is that they wake up in the middle of the night and we see this super eerie, not really creepy, but eerie images of these, what could be monkeys
And someone's taken a rifle.
climbing on a line, a vine, something way up above them. Gargan shoots.
They've taken one of their firearms. He has his pistol and he just shoots
And even-
without asking questions.
Even if these were animals, that feels like very much not the correct move to make.
No, not at all.
But it turns out they are humans, which seemed plausible to us,
Yeah.
even before we get confirmation.
So he's a homicidal maniac, and now he has incurred the wrath of
It's
a
a
whole
very-
new group of
It's
people.
a very albatross moment.
Yeah.
Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. Of course, this is the most racially problematic point of the movie. Now, up until this point, it's really been a civilization versus utopian nature, in which civilization has the worst of it, because civilization is Gargan,
Yeah.
right? Braggadocio and force.
The way Herbert Marshall puts it is that the people who were small in the outside world, in the socio-political world, in this pared down state are expanding and becoming greater people, as far as he's concerned. And the people that were major figures outside are getting reduced to the state, maybe like the people in the novel. Although that's really only Gargan, because Mary Boland is fine wherever she goes.
It's a very Nietzsche, it's a sort of Nietzschean analysis, right? Where the people who are not big shots in the world of money and action in civilization are the ones who have developed souls, I guess.
Yeah, and Gargan has no soul.
Right. And you're going to need a soul when there is no society to tell you how great you are and help you out. But here at this point, there does seem to be a sinister element introduced into nature, possibly. Although civilization is also at its most sinister point here. Definitely
Yeah.
more sinister. And Montague tells us that he implies that they are the most backward natives and that they don't even speak language. So they are the most animal-like. He
didn't say they
He
don't.
did
No, he
say-
said I can't speak to them.
No, he says...
So
okay,
he-
so what he says is they don't understand language, and right after that he says very inferior native.
Right.
Because he sometimes drops his articles, it's ambiguous whether he just means they don't understand any language known to me,
Yes, that's what I think he means.
but he thinks they are inferior because they don't understand any language known to him. So they have their own language, but it's very different
Yeah.
than the other tribes. They are eerie. They are, even from the viewpoint of the other tribes, they are ambiguous between animal and human. And
Wow.
yes, that is the symbolic role they occupy in the narrative.
No, that's the way he constructs it, but I think that the film is also
Yeah, the film is
calling
both,
that into question.
I think the film is both using that symbol and questioning it. Yes.
Yeah, because
they're just alien. We just don't know anything about them. They're mysterious.
It's exactly the same way you would see a European speak in a lot of these kinds of films whenever they encounter someone that speaks a language.
But they don't reveal themselves as anything less than alien to us during this whole encounter. They don't reveal themselves to us as anything familiar as human. But they are still the victims.
Yes, they are. They've been transgressed upon.
All they did... Yeah, like the albatross. Nature has been transgressed upon.
There are things that are known about them, like they don't kill Europeans. And again, that's got to be because there have been terrible reprisals taken against them in the past.
Of course. So it turns out that Montague ends up being accidentally sacrificed, and therefore, I guess, they ultimately allow the other ones to escape.
Yeah, this is where his sort of self-hating or bizarre state of denial that he's in, that he is a member of the supreme white class, the European class, does not serve him well, because despite his protest to the contrary, this group of people see him in a different way and shoot him in the neck with an arrow.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's very sad to see him go. He's been one of the most sincere and fun characters throughout.
True.
And he seems to be wrong, actually, because they start shooting arrows.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what happened after that.
Well, Gargan starts shooting. I guess they will shoot back if people are shooting at them. So
yeah, I guess he thought he was going to shoot his way out of there. I don't know.
Yeah, all of these things are a bit muddled. It is true that they don't press their advantage. They could come in and just make sure all these three remaining people are dead, and they don't. But they do fire an arrow that is going to kill Claudette Colbert, but Herbert Marshall gets in the way and gets an arrow in the back.
And then they get tied up for a while, but then they're left alone.
Yeah, they're not killed. So I guess Montague was right about that. They won't kill you unless they have to shoot you with an arrow for some reason in self-defense.
Anyway, they're very mysterious, but they are not...
And they won't be back.
They're not aggressive. Well, they stole the rifle. Who knows what that's about? Maybe just to avoid being shot.
I would take a rifle if I could find one and I was in that position where Europeans could traipse in at any moment with gunboats and marines. Then it becomes a touch-and-go saga of Herbert Marshall's recovery. He gets fevered and crazy.
Yeah, and he and Claudette Colbert get closer.
They're tied together during this.
They get very close at that point. She's got her Sheena outfit on now.
Yes.
I don't know how these total incompetence could kill a leopard.
Well, if you've got a gun, I guess you can do it if you get lucky.
None of them are hunters.
No, but Gargan does seem to be a marksman. Whatever he shoots at, he hits.
That's true.
I mean, he killed that guy from a pretty far distance on the vine.
True.
So.
But then he just leaves the making of the women's clothes to Herbert Marshall. So now they've found these paradisical ruins. They've also had long ago, they had their discussion that we already alluded to by the water when Claudette Colbert is fishing, where the two men each make their move, and she chooses Herbert Marshall, obviously.
That's probably the most beautiful sequence in the film. You've got alternation between Colbert's reflection in the pool and the fish in the water.
Yeah, except that she's going to kill the fish.
I'm not saying that it's PETA approved, that's for sure, but it is a visually striking sequence.
Definitely.
And yeah, she does end it by spearing a fish for dinner.
What are you going to do? They're back to nature. They're killing things with their bare hands.
Possibly this is something that is more developed in the book, but things do get really crazy at the end there, because the final day that they're on the island, she goes foraging and sees the coast, and at this point she's decided that she has no interest in going back to the United States.
Yeah, she's gonna kill Gargan.
Yeah. The first thing she decides to do is just not mention to anyone that she has seen their way clear out of this. Because Herbert Marshall is married, if they go back to America, he is stuck in that relationship, and she goes back to her classroom by herself.
Well, no, they've really settled into their lives in the wild here, and she's happier and sexier than she has ever been before in this new world. It's like the people who are happier during lockdown.
Yeah.
Those weirdos.
Like us. Yeah.
We were talking about that when we did Lost Horizon, too.
Yeah.
And it did make me think of Lost Horizon at the end here.
She is not confident that Herbert Marshall really wants to just stay here, even though he said he does. she
Well,
really
it
is
turns
a
out-
true believer, and she's right that he
Yeah,
does
exactly.
want to go back to the United
So
States.
she's like Ronald Coleman. She's become a convert. She would rather live in this world where she is literally queen of the jungle.
We get a little bit of nice love talk where she mentions nothing about their potential escape route, but then Gargan shows up and he's going to tell Herbert Marshall, and he actually is putting it in very spiteful terms, knowing that Claudette Colbert wants no part of a rescue
Well,
at this
he's not
point.
happy that he's been romantically rejected for Herbert Marshall.
Yeah, so he's like, I'm going to make us all go back to the United States just to ruin your relationship.
And she's gonna kill him.
She seems like if fate hadn't intervened, she would have killed him. She
She's
says
really-
she's going to.
She's really gone back to the jungle ways.
Yeah, that is pretty Lord of the Flies right there. Maybe in the book she does kill him.
Who knows?
That's kind of what I'm
the book
assuming.
does seem intriguing.
It doesn't come to that because Gargan gets off the information to Herbert Marshall, and then there's no point in homicide. So they all just have to go to the boat. That part of the story is done. They go.
I don't even know if there's a romantic ending in the book because it said picked off one by one.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
for the
I don't
first-
think that's what happens in the book.
The first half of the movie, I kept thinking that Claudette Colbert's character was a very early last girl. Is that what they're called in horror movies? The
Final girl.
Final girl, that's it. The one who survives because she's the least sexual.
No, that's
in-
not at
within,
all.
Within the tropes. Of course, she does become very sexual in the course of the movie, so that wouldn't even work. Who knows what happens in the book, that's all.
They've got their escape, whether they want it or not. Now we switch over to Mary Boland and see what's been going on with her. And
Oh, God, I forgot. Right. Her white feminist triumph.
yes, so whatever you've been expecting, it's not this. Basically started some kind of outdoor classroom with the kids of the village.
I don't know why they need to be taught to use spears by her.
I don't know.
What organized activities?
Really get the most out of our days here. And she's also made good friends with the mothers. And there's some kind of solidarity building here from the film's perspective and certainly from her perspective. When it comes time for them to kill her because there's been no shipment of rice, well, there's a
No.
mass revolt.
No, the issue isn't that. The issue is that they're mad at her because the wives are refusing to have sex with them.
Fine, but also they had promised to kill her. And when they bring her in to have justice done to her, well, it's not going to work. They can kill her, of course,
She
if
says
they
they're
want,
afraid of
but
their wives.
the wives and all the kids, I mean, these warrior husbands, I guess, are pretty well outnumbered by everyone else in the
And
village.
she says that the men, at the end, the men have agreed that the women will now determine the sizes of the family. So the idea is some kind of absolutely horrible assumption about non-upper middle class white families that the only reason they're having large families is because the men want to have a lot of sex. And this is all just, I don't even know what to do with any of this. It's terrible. Good example of that, of white feminism.
Doesn't even feel hardly at all like an artifact of its time. It just feels like this is
Still the same.
a political vector that comes out of a naive brand of feminism anyway. And naive is the best way to characterize it. Sinister.
And close to
Imperialistic
eugenics
feminism.
and like just disturbing.
Yeah, it's all executed with,
A plum?
a wink and a smile.
Yeah, there you go.
It's an
Finally.
amusing scene, but one with very disturbing overtones that bleed into
But
our
it's just-
present century.
I just find it interesting that it is disturbing in such a non-obvious way. It doesn't make the missteps that you think it's going to make. At least not for me. They're very subtle and deep cuts, these missteps.
So all four of the frightened people actually make it back to America. Nobody gets picked off except for poor Montague.
Yeah, he is sacrificed as the non-white guy.
Yeah. Back in America, this scene with Herbert Marshall, that woman they got to play his wife, that was insane. She looked like she was 20 years older than Herbert Marshall, who doesn't look that young.
Yeah, she did not come off well next to Claudette Colbert, especially in her island form.
This is DeMille saying there's a hierarchy of women and sexy women are at the top. If you have the temerity to look middle-aged, well, fuck you.
Well, I mean, you can be like Mary Boland and just have your Alfred at home.
Actually, Mary Boland looks pretty cute in the final scenes where she's teaching.
She has a kind of cool sarong on or something at that point, too.
But no, Herbert Marshall's wife, there's nothing appealing about her in any way. And what she says to him is that the papers, because William Gargan has gone on a mission to use his platform to tarnish the reputations of his fellow frightened people, and he's publishing articles about Claudette Colbert and Herbert Marshall. Marshall's wife says, I know you. I know there can't really be any grounds for divorce because you're completely asexual. But just the fact that the papers are saying that you've done this to me, we're going to have to separate just based on that. And he tells her, no, there are grounds for divorce.
And then he goes and finds Claudette Colbert, who's no longer wearing glasses and giving a lesson in which she's trying to get her students to understand the romantic nature of geography.
Yeah, so...
Instead of which they get up and start citing dry, boring facts, and Herbert Marshall comes in, and he and Claudette Colbert go off while the schoolboy is reciting into a room, shut the door, and have sex.
And that's the end of the film. That's the end of the movie. So a happy lovers reunion. They get to make their own Malay Peninsula in the United States.
Is no longer a schoolboy.
No. All right. Mitchell Leisen's Behold My Wife.
So, For Frightened People was produced, obviously, by Cecil B. DeMille. This was produced by Schulberg and Zucker.
Well, I think Schulberg. I don't think Zucker really did any personal productions. Does it say that he did?
Wikipedia says, but I only noticed Schulberg on the film itself.
Yeah, B.P. Schulberg was a hands-on producer. My understanding is that Zucker was really kind of removed from day-to-day operations on films. Schulberg's going to be an important character in our Clara Bow series, coming up very shortly.
Why?
Because I think he was responsible for producing most of her films, wasn't he?
Well, he's very important in early Paramount, generally.
Yeah.
Behold My Wife was based on a novel called, what was it again? The Translation of a Savage.
Doesn't sound good.
Doesn't sound good except until you realize immediately upon seeing the characterization of the upper class characters, you realize that it's a satirical title.
Yes.
But the author, Sir Gilbert Parker, 1st Baronet, was a Canadian, liked to write a lot about another subject he doesn't have any first-hand knowledge of, French Canadians, apparently. French Canadians and Indigenous Canadians, subjects he enjoyed writing about.
Where did he live? Toronto?
Ontario. Educated as a teacher in Ottawa.
Well, if he's in Ottawa, at least, that's pretty much in Quebec.
Like, yeah, I'm sure he met French Canadians. And later a lecturer at Trinity College. At University of Toronto, not the one
in Dublin.
In Dublin.
Okay, so 3 blocks from our house, he was a professor at Trinity College.
So I'm going to assume that the setting has been transposed from Canada, which would have been quite interesting.
Would have been Toronto high society, extra waspy.
Exactly. So it actually probably would have been... I bet the novel is pretty interesting. Transposed to America, which in this instance might be considerably less snobby than Canada. Let's look at the screenwriters. The name Grover Jones rang a bell for me. Trouble in Paradise, I guess that's where I know his name from.
Great film.
Yeah, one of the greatest. Anything else jump out at you in his filmography here?
One Sunday Afternoon is the original version of The Strawberry Blonde.
Okay, that's a stretch, but okay. I guess the other figure here is
Leon Shamroy.
Leon Shamroy, who we've discussed
Important
before.
Cinematographer at Fox in the 40s. A big noir guy.
Well, that's what I was going to say. This is... compared to the sort of classical Lubitchian style that Leisen's later screwball comedies are shot in, romantic comedies, screwball comedies, whatever you want to call them, that are coming right around the corner, this is very adventurously shot. And both the beginning and the ending were very anticipatory of film noir, much more so than most films I've seen of this era.
Hands Across the Table has amazing cinematography. That's Ted Tetzlaff, who worked on a lot of Lombard vehicles at Paramount. So I don't want to dismiss
Yeah, but what
those.
about all of these expressionistic montages?
Yeah,
at the
those
beginning
were
of this
cool.
movie?
For sure.
That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about.
Yeah, and Leisen is just getting into directing here, so he's trying out a bunch of different things that maybe he won't stick with.
Yeah, but it was interesting to see.
Sylvia Sidney is the star of the film. She's the only one billed above the title.
We saw her before in our podcast. Oh, in that Mamoulian film. What was that called again?
City Streets?
Yeah, it's called City Streets, not Street Scene. City Streets, that's it.
She's also in Street Scene, but we haven't discussed that on the podcast.
That's right.
We also saw her in Merrily We Go to Hell, which we did in our Dorothy Arzner episode.
Sidney, a very low-key actress, but very capable.
Oh, she's one of my favorite 30s actresses.
And
beyond, obviously.
Both in her appearance, and I'll probably say this every time we do a Sylvia Sidney film, but both in her appearance and her presence on screen, I just find her very, very appealing.
Yeah, she's incredible.
But
one of the most unique stars of the period.
Not Native American.
No, so that's a big problem.
She was born to a Romanian Jew and a Russian Jewish immigrant and grew up in the Bronx, as you can hear in her lovely soft-spoken accent.
She encountered a lot of blacklisting type trouble, even in the late 30s. So she's one of the people that was such a vocal left-winger that even before McCarthyism, she was getting into trouble, like Anne Dvorak.
Oh yeah, and then there's an Anne in this movie, Anne Sheridan.
Anne Sheridan, one of my very favorite actresses. Now, she is a Warner Brothers.
Role.
Yeah, she's a Warner Brothers mainstay starting in the late 30s, going through the 40s, but she first showed up in Hollywood. She won a beauty contest, signed with Paramount, and this is probably the biggest role she got at Paramount. It wasn't anything major, but pretty good one-scene role. They never really developed her, so she goes over to Warner Brothers. They didn't know what to do with her for a while either, and she finally makes it big as the oomph girl by the late 30s.
I'm going to try something out here and tell me if you think this isn't going anywhere, but do you think that it adds a layer to the film that at least a non-WASP actress is playing the Native American role?
No, I don't think so.
It is interesting to think about the fact that you can't even have an explicitly Jewish character, let alone one marrying a WASP character at, like, basically throughout the studio era. Not quite throughout.
No, in the pre-code era, you certainly can.
Like where?
There's tons of movies from 1930 to 1934 where the characters are Jewish, but after that, yes, you don't really ever hear it mentioned. Yeah.
Even, it's rare. It's rare. It's not tons. It's definitely not tons.
Definitely a lot. It was not a big deal. In Street Scene, it's talked about a lot.
Okay. But I feel like that's a highbrow exception because it was based on a stage play. So is what was it called? The Symphony of 6 Million, which is a Selznick specialty.
And Counselor at Law,
and
also
Daring.
an Elmer Rice play, but that has John Barrymore playing a Jewish lawyer.
I always feel like it's a little bit daring when they're doing it. And are these characters marrying wasps a lot of the time?
Yes. Counselor at Law, that's what it's about. The problems that he's having because he has married a wasp and now he feels like he's betrayed the people that he should be helping. And he gets
I remember.
That's a great movie.
It's a sophisticated stage play, though.
But no, I don't feel like casting Sylvia Sidney as a Native American is any better than casting any other white person as a Native American.
All right, I was just trying something out there. And then there's about a 10-year period where you cannot be explicitly Jewish. John Garfield.
Right,
You can be non-explicitly Jewish.
In body and soul, he is Jewish, but that's after World War II.
Exactly.
Instead, he played a lot of Hispanic roles for some reason.
Do you think it adds a layer?
No, it's...
No layers.
So that's a strike against this film right off the bat. Anything trenchant it's doing, and it is doing some interesting things, is obviously undercut by the fact that they can't or won't cast a Native American actress in this role. With that disclaimer, we will forge ahead. Important roles in this film. Gene Raymond. I like Gene Raymond. He's a guy that started out as leading player. We've seen him before, at least.
He's likable in this. Yeah, and what was that thing called?
Zoo in Budapest. That's a great movie.
Yes.
And he's also he's the actual lead in Flying Down to Rio, paired with Dolores Del Rio in that one, while Fred and Ginger kind of steal the spotlight by the end. But he's good. And he marries Janet MacDonald. And they are amazing together in Frank Borzegi's Smilin' Through in 1941, the remake.
So what I was expecting of this film, knowing nothing except that Sylvia Sidney played a Native American woman, or, I don't know, should we use the terminology of the period Indian, or should we just say, which is still somewhat in use in America, or should we just say Apache, since we actually know...
That's what they say.
When I heard that Sylvia Sidney was playing an Indian woman, and that's all I knew about the movie, I assumed it was going to be an interracial romance. But it's not exactly that, although it is that by the end. It's not what I assumed, which is two people who love each other.
Star-crossed lovers.
Exactly.
and society is holding them back. No, it's much more complicated than that. And we don't meet Sylvia Sidney for a long time. Everything is arranged around the Jean Raymond family.
As we're going to see in this movie, prejudice against Native Americans is very different from other kinds of racial prejudice, and I'm just going to have to talk about what happens in the film because I don't know enough about it to be interesting on what these differences are or why they occur.
Sure.
But certainly one thing to keep in mind is that in the Canadian system, for sure, and I think to a large extent in the American system, assimilation was the goal. So that means you probably want intermarriage. Like, that was the governmental goal, assimilation. Assimilation as second-class citizens, of course.
Yeah, Canadian policy was geared around termination of the reserve system, ultimately, right? Like,
so,
they wanted
that's a very Canadian for the novel, right?
Yeah.
Translation of a savage. That's what it was all about.
Before any of that can happen, there's no indication that we're going to go... If you didn't know that that's what this movie was going to be about, you would be forgiven for thinking it was just a satire or kind of a terrifying drama of class relations in New York City in 1934, because Jean Raymond is the scion of a wealthy WASP family, and we meet his parents first. They're worried, and we meet a bunch of people talking about him and talking about the milieu in which they live. Everyone's sort of having affairs with everyone else, and it all just seems very gross. Everyone's kind of worried about their standing in society.
It's kind of similar to the world in Midnight, actually.
Yeah, a little bit.
Although that was the high society world in that movie, although that was written by Brackett and Wilder.
This is a lot, there are a lot
this
more
is nastier.
intense consequences.
Yes.
H.B. Warner and Laura Hope Cruz, they're the parents who are just dithering about, their son and whether he's going to make good or cause them trouble. And Eric Bloor is the detective/butler who keeps everyone apprised of what's going on. Jean Raymond finally stumbles into the film drunk and babbling about some delightful experience he's had and an even more delightful experience he's expecting to have the next day with a woman that Bloor correctly infers he is going to marry.
Yeah, the tone is really all over the place, bouncing back and forth between satire, broad comedy, noir, and serious fucking drama in the first 15 minutes or so.
Gives us all the tools to understand why Jean Raymond is a fall-down drunk, because he has to live with these terrible people. He's found a way out, possibly. He has met and fallen in love with Anne Sheridan.
A stenographer.
Yes. Mary White?
Yeah, that's her name.
Initially don't have much to go on, right? We see Jean Raymond. He seems like a perfectly genial drunk, and he's talking about an angel. He doesn't seem crass. He doesn't seem like the kind of person that goes around exploiting and jilting women. But that's what we're told he does when his sister goes as the ambassador to Anne Sheridan in order to buy her off and send her on a rail to California. And we don't know the truth at this point. She could be, because she plays it very much as if, yes, I'm sorry.
Well, the only way we can infer the truth is from Anne Sheridan's reaction.
Well, we know that Anne Sheridan believes that he's in love with her, but she could be wrong.
She could be, but the way she plays it and the way she talks about, just because I'm a stenographer, I'm not an idiot,
Yeah.
It made me lean toward believing that this was the invention of the family.
Yeah, but the problem is that
the family is playing a melodrama scene.
Yeah, of course, but the problem is that Anne Sheridan must believe that ultimately it's true, because...
Well, they've even gotten to his club and left a message for her and everything.
Yeah, so she kills herself. If she thought that this was a ruse by the family, she would not kill herself, right? She must really believe that Jean Raymond doesn't even remember her at this point and didn't want to marry her.
And I guess she kills herself over either having sex with him or being pregnant, who knows?
Yeah, or just being heartbroken, I don't know.
Well, in that case, she's insane.
Okay, fine, but being that wrong about someone and getting this insulting offer of money and a ticket to California...
That means she slept with him.
Yeah.
She's not going to feel this ashamed if she hasn't slept with him.
No, okay, fine.
Or degraded.
Yes, I'm sure she did sleep with him. I agree with you there.
Thank you.
So yeah, that that is not the kind of thing you expect to see in light Mitchell Leisen comedy, and it turns out this isn't that.
Or even in an interracial romance, I wasn't expecting this scene either.
No, poor Anne Sheridan is the first casualty.
It's really horrifying. Right before she jumps, we get confirmation that it was all a lie. So then the horror is, there's a bigger impact, even, so to speak.
This sister is a deeply cold-blooded figure, right? She's shaken by the suicide.
She's not happy that this was the result, but she's also like, what a silly girl.
But she's definitely got her wits about her and goes up and clears out all the evidence.
Oh, it's going to be a big scandal.
Yeah, so, that would defeat the whole purpose.
Worse scandal than marrying a stenographer.
Right.
The suicide of a stenographer. It's like The Apartment.
It's quite an incredible sequence, actually.
Yeah.
She goes home, tells the parents what's happened. Gene Raymond, blissfully asleep through all of this, wakes up around noon on...
Yeah, he's late for their meeting for their wedding, obviously.
And they tell him, no, don't marry this girl. This isn't right. It's going to make everyone unhappy. You won't like it. And he just persists in making the phone call and getting ready for the wedding anyway. And he is told that his fiancée has killed herself. And then it comes out that this was all engineered by his insane Machiavellian family. You guys don't
seem surprised.
Yeah.
Why aren't you surprised?
And he plays this really well. You get really on board with this guy. And you need to be, because he's going to do some terrible things himself later on. But he's completely shattered by what's happening here. He's not a full person anymore until maybe near the end of the film. This is just so disillusioning that he wants to go off and never see these fuckers again.
And this is where we get our drinking, sports car driving, and general noir agony montage.
Yep, and he is going state by state on the trajectory that they wanted Anne Sheridan to take. Go west.
Yeah, except he's drunker.
Yeah, he miraculously doesn't kill anyone, and he still has enough of his wits about him to steer the car away from running over a shepherd and a whole bunch of sheep. When he's in, it turns out, New Mexico, I think. They never actually say, but
they say
the
Albuquerque.
Closest town is Albuquerque, probably New Mexico.
Decor and traditional dress seem vaguely accurate for the area, as far as I know.
Maybe.
As far as I know, which isn't far. Not as far as you can throw me.
He's unfazed by all of this. He doesn't even really care if he lives or dies. He just leaves his car in a ditch and goes looking for somewhere to drink. Stumbles in, there's a genial bartender.
Well, genial but racist.
Yeah, well, I wasn't going to neglect to mention that, but when he's talking to Gene Raymond, he's genial. Dean Jagger comes in. 20 years later, he'll be playing the general in White Christmas, but here he is an Indian man.
The big Indian, as he keeps getting called.
Yeah. Now here, this is the kind of thing that a lot of this film is using racist tropes against racists in order to come to some kind of new synthesis that hopefully will leave the audience thinking about these things. But this first scene is just kind of playing into stereotypes about alcohol.
The only non-stereotypical thing is that there is also an educated Indian woman.
Yeah, but she's not in the scene at first. I'm just talking about...
Yeah, but I'm saying that doesn't actually change the fact that Pete is a stereotype.
Yeah, exactly. He's just a total stereotype. I don't think the film needs this. Well, one, this is proof that this is certainly not the kind of film that you would want to release in the 21st century, even with racially appropriate casting. The script would have to be altered anyway in order to do what you're trying to do.
Well, the problem is that, in a lot of ways, the whole problem with this movie, not just with its treatment of race, is that it's a very fast movie of a novel that sounds like it was probably pretty complex.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even hit all of the emotional points it needs to as well as it should, again, just because of the brevity. And it certainly, when it's playing around with racial stereotypes, doesn't have enough time to land whatever it's attempting to do in an interesting way.
Well, it does very interesting things with it at the party sequence much, much later.
Yeah, but that's because Leisen is giving himself this whole sequence to stretch out in.
Yeah. Anytime you're doing this kind of film, just keep alcohol out of it. It's too
there's me,
fraught.
There's also me and how going on.
Not the best scene. It becomes important to the plot, and they need to find some way to get Gene Raymond shot, and
What
this
on
is what they
earth?
found to do
What
it.
on earth was that movie we saw, which I believe is also from the early 30s? Because the fact that Sylvia Sidney's character, what is her name? Tonita Stormcloud, that she has gone to college.
Yeah, there's the one with Richard Barthelmess.
Yeah, the one that actually was about politics on native reserves and their relationship to the state, and it was really interesting.
Yeah, it's a Warner Brothers film.
What was it called?
From the same year, Massacre.
Yeah, there's some actual cultural economic analysis in that film. So that is one that really could be resurrected, not that it's completely free of problems, which would be too much to ask.
Well, again, Richard Barthelmess.
Well, besides that, yeah, he's not Native American.
It's, of course, characteristic of Warner Brothers to get into the economic aspect.
Yeah, and governmental aspects and all of that, yeah.
How the New Deal is going to handle this terrible situation.
Anyway, so in this movie, Sylvia Sidney is just a college-educated Apache woman. She comes in. I kept expecting this to turn out to be her brother, but no, it's her boyfriend. Don't know how that happened. Anyway, she's telling him off for getting drunk again, and he starts shooting. I think there is an implication that they all rightfully hate white people, and that's part of the reason. I think we can understand, even just from this brief film, that that's both why Pete is getting drunk and why he starts shooting up the place.
Yeah, okay, that's fine, sure.
As far as that goes.
And Gene Raymond is just as drunk and wants to get in on the shooting.
Yeah, he's being no good, as Sylvia Sidney tells him.
And he gets shot instead when he's trying to wrestle the gun from Pete. And he's not doing it in any heroic way. He just wants to also break some bottles with
Interestingly, everyone, including the bartender, wants to cover this up because they're all going to get in trouble. The bartender was not legally supposed to be selling liquor to Indians.
He doesn't actually sell it, but Gene Raymond takes the alcohol and gives it to Pete, so I don't know if the courts would see any difference there.
Some random white guy's gonna end up dead like this. None of this is looking good.
So it's an important thing.
The bartender has a cottage or something on the mesa, he says, to take him to.
Yeah, time to go up there, nurse him back to health. If he survives, then they could just all not mention it, and nobody will go to jail over this.
And if he dies, they can bury him in the desert.
Yeah, who's gonna care? And actually, her first reaction is just like, I hope he just dies. Because all she knows about him in the bar is that
he's a white jackass.
Yeah, but of course that changes fairly quickly when she gets to know him as she nurses him back to health. When he's not completely hammered, he is kind of a likable guy and a sad sack. Doesn't seem to care if he lives or dies. Obviously that brings out the tender side in anyone.
As she extracts the bullet, she tells him some stories about the torture performed by and on her grandfather.
Right. Warfare gets pretty intense.
Again, I can't tell whether she's making this up.
No, I don't think she's making it up.
To distract him?
Doesn't.
I also don't know. I have no clue how historically based any of these Hollywood movie stories are about the tortures inflicted by even warlike tribes.
Yeah, I have no idea about that.
I have no idea.
But she seems to be sincere in relaying this as a story that has come down to her through her family. And they get to talking. They have some good times playing double solitaire. There's a wonderful moment where she tells him that she loves him. He doesn't even notice.
Doesn't she say she's crazy about him?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so good. She does such a great job. And that's the kind of thing that Leisen does maybe better than just about anyone. This out of nowhere intimacy that just takes you by surprise. And he's already a master of this in 1934.
But obviously this guy is both heartbroken and hell-bent on getting revenge on his family, so he is in no condition to fall in love.
No, not at all. I mean, he's getting along fine with her. He seems to like her, but he's not. He doesn't hear her when she says that, and he wouldn't have registered it in any human way if he did. He's too broken.
Yeah.
All he knows, his brain starts working on its own crazed track when it is revealed that she is going to be disgraced for spending the night in the cottage with him. Now, his initial impulse is like, no, you're my nurse. I'll just tell them. And she says, no, they're not going to accept it. It's over for me.
Well,
I'm going to be expelled from
she's
the
been
group.
disowned by the tribe. Again, no idea if this has any kind of
That doesn't seem...
cultural, historical basis whatsoever. It's also used in Clan of the Cave Bear, so
yeah,
no
me,
idea.
That doesn't seem at all feasible. But that's the way Apache society is presented, as just as bad. Like, there's definitely...
Oh yeah, for sure. They have both been disowned by their tribes.
Yeah.
They have both disgraced their tribes and been disowned by them. So it's the idea of high society being tribal that you get in Martin Scorsese's
Age of Innocence.
Age of Innocence, the Horton novel. And there's even a Grand Dame that's in this movie. And it is set in New York, too.
Yeah.
I mean, the movie is. I don't know about the novel. Who is kind of faintly reminiscent of the one in Age of Innocence.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, she's the only ally Sylvia Sidney finds there, really.
I don't know, maybe the novelist was inspired by it, but I haven't read the novel.
Disgraced. That's... Gene Raymond just starts repeating that to himself, and then we witness the scene of her being like in a military film where they break your saber over their knee and rip off your medals, and that's it, you're gone.
But she's like, that's fine. I mean, we have to buy this romantic trope that she's so in love after a night or two playing solitaire with this guy that she's willing to lose her entire family and culture over it.
There is a tender parting scene with her father, who doesn't seem to be, like, he's not the architect of this. He doesn't maybe want to do it, but pressures are on him to walk away from her.
So it is an interesting inversion of all the standard non-white rape threat of Hollywood movies. In this case, the problem is that you're as good as raped if you spend the night with a white man.
Yeah, the movie, again, it's very interested in this character, played by Sylvia Sidney, but it doesn't seem to have any interest in anyone else that she has ever lived with, and it does make it seem like her life was terrible there, if the best she could do for a potential mate
was Pete.
Right, so this is not exactly a balanced portrayal. It doesn't make any effort to seem like she's losing anything, really.
Yeah, she's like, I'll be fine, I can get a job, college educated, the sisters will help me out.
Yeah.
They all want me to assimilate anyway.
However, Gene Raymond has a better idea, and he had threatened, it was his vow upon leaving New York, that he was going to do something so incredibly disgraceful that his family would wish that he had married Anne Sheridan. And this is what it is. Marrying Sylvia Sidney is his ultimate revenge. I mean, so this is dark, man.
It's foul.
This is worse behavior than most straight-up villains.
Faintly anticipates, again, another Wilder bracket Leisen movie, which is Hold Back the Dawn, in that he's going to use a woman for his own purposes, but ends up falling in love with her. But the use in this case is
it's even
so
crueler.
hideous.
Yeah.
It's really, like, the only word is dehumanizing.
Yeah, Charles Boyer is trying to get into the United States. That's a goal, and she's collateral damage. In this case...
He wants to destroy his family by her being herself.
Yeah, exactly. This is really insane. Quite a strong premise for a story.
Yeah, and it feels so Canadian, man. Oh my god, I hope it is set in Toronto, that novel. Maybe I need to get my hands on this. I want to know if it's set in New York. I want to know if it's set in Toronto. I just want to know.
And of course, it's all exacerbated. Sylvia Sidney is so excited about this, and she's so good at conveying that, you know...
She's so sweet.
Uncomplicated affection.
Oh, yeah.
It's
She's so
just
lovely.
Horrifying to watch.
I love her movies with George Raft.
Yeah.
He's so simple as well.
We just talked about Fury. She's great in that too.
She's sweet, but she's just as tough as she needs to be too, which becomes important.
She's really good at conveying this deeply open-hearted emotion that she has for this guy, who just seems like a sad sack, and I guess she feels like they can fix each other's lives. It would be wonderful. Of course, it really could be, but he is just not seeing it at all. And he won't even sleep with her. It's like...
Oh yeah, that's awesome. The first night in the train where she's like, what the hell? What's going on? And they have the marriage scene where I guess, I mean, she wouldn't necessarily have ever heard a Christian marriage ceremony.
Yeah, this is like an
I'm
interesting
sure the sisters
thing.
treated her to lots of Bible talk, but not this particular Bible talk. And she's like, oh, better or worse, sickness or health. Oh, isn't that lovely?
That's what you would notice. You would be experiencing it all for the first time as a participant, which is not common.
And then on the train, that's her first inkling that something's seriously wrong with this marriage because they have separate compartments.
Yeah, and they only seem to play cards. That's all they do together. Why did you marry me? To play cards?
But she couldn't possibly conceivably guess.
No, of course not.
What this crazy guy has in mind.
Yeah. So as they near New York and are about to disembark, he wants her to wear her
traditional clothing.
And she says, well, don't you want me to try to fit in? Isn't that what usually has to happen? And he's like, no, I want them to see you the way I first saw you. And I mean, it's just so manipulative. It's the only way to save this character is if he is willing to die for her. And of course,
that's exactly what happens.
but other than that, there's nothing he can do
No.
to atone for this fucked up behavior.
Exactly. And then I really liked, but of course, the premise is such that, I don't know, it's kind of like, the revenge plot in Ladies of the Bois de Boulogne, which is similar. She finds a woman in a difficult situation, Maria Casares does, and manipulates her and uses her for the purposes of her revenge romantically.
Yeah, it's true.
And yeah, it is very hard. That character never comes back from that, and she
No.
doesn't even have a racial angle, which makes this so much worse. Thinking of Ladies of the Bois de Boulogne, the premise is such that you can't also help but enjoy the revenge aspect. So it's actually a really fascinatingly complicated scene for the white viewer when she does show up and has that impact on the family, because you can't help but you're feeling so much for her, but at the same time really do want to see this family be horrified.
Yeah, they're awful people, so anything bad that happens to them, you kind of have to cheer.
And he has picked a perfect thing. The moment in Ladies of the Bois de Boulogne at the end is, you married a whore.
Yep.
And you, even if you absolutely don't agree with the concept of whore, it's just like, yes!
Yeah, it is probably the best parallel. The only other thing I can think of that even partakes of anything like this, there are some aspects of the Lady Eve that feel...
Oh, Lady Eve is Ladies of the Bois de Boulogne as a comedy, which means it's a tragedy that gets played as a comedy.
Right.
As a broad screwball comedy.
Do we know if Ladies of the Bois de Boulogne was inspired by Lady Eve? It's only a couple years later.
Diderot story? Is it
Oh,
Diderot?
right. Yeah.
No, it just, Preston Sturges has classical story structure.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
What I found very interesting about this sequence, now it turns sort of almost into, from Ladies of the Bois de Boulogne to Mr. Deeds with race.
Yeah, a little bit.
An outsider who wins over, a simpler outsider who wins over the sophisticated crowd. But
also lashes out like a Capra hero,
yeah,
because
exactly.
when she realizes that they're putting her on, these journalists are expecting her to behave in a certain way, and they're using really demeaning language. She starts kicking over their apparatus.
What they're doing, and this is the most sophisticated, I would say, of an analysis of race that this movie gets, is that they're trying to sexualize her.
Yes.
And a lot of native academic feminism is about the sexualization of the figure of the indigenous woman.
That's true, yeah.
Hiking her skirt up for the photo.
Yeah.
And this is what sets her off, rightly?
She's got a much better reason to lash out and punch these guys and destroy their cameras than Jimmy Stewart has in Mr. Smith.
Well, yeah, it's more like Mr. Deeds.
Well, even there, I don't know, she's got better grounds for...
Oh, for sure, definitely. She's well within her rights.
The delicate balance, the family was trying to pretend like they're happy about it. Maybe they could carry that off and appear progressive or something, but they just crumble when they see that this is going to be the news story, that she attacks reporters upon her arrival in New York City. Again, we get some insight into the damage control politics of this social set. They realize that the only way to come back from that is to throw a giant party and again show how delighted they are about all of it.
Man, the more we talk about this, despite how fast and breezy it is, the more complex this movie seems, and the more I'm really liking it, and how many things it intersects with textually.
No,
and then adds race and makes it worse.
it's quite a brilliant film in a lot of ways, yes. There are other vectors operating on this, though. The sister character, she's a fairly major character. I don't know that actress.
I guess Juliet Compton? Yeah, that's her, all right.
So she's having an affair with Monroe Owsley, who is a
she was in Ladies of Leisure.
Is she the fiancé?
Probably must be. Wow. Thankless roles in that case.
Yeah. In this one, she actually has a lot to do.
Claire Collins? Would that be the fiancé? That's what she's listed as. Yeah, it must be.
Yeah, there's only one other female character.
Exactly.
So yeah, she's having an affair with Monroe Owsley, a playboy. No one is safe around.
Kind of similar, again, to what we see in Midnight with Mary Astor, but turns very ugly.
Her husband knows about it. Everything is just very decadent. And he just derives joy from seeing her boyfriend at the racetrack with a blonde.
Yeah.
That's the only satisfaction he has left in life, is to know that...
and then mention it in front of his wife.
Yeah, his wife's being cheated on as well. But she actually, this is not just some passing affair. She's obsessed with this guy.
Although he's foul but has some self-insight, and he's probably correct when he says that's just pride. That you're trying to hang on to me. It's not love.
He's like a Monty Berrigan kind of character that you can kind of sympathize with at some times, and then at other times, I guess he's just completely... Although he's never quite as reprehensible as Monty Berrigan.
Who's that?
From Mildred Pierce, who sleeps with Mildred's daughter.
Well, you always have to like the rogue who's self-aware.
And he's best friends with his aunt, who is the only person, as you mentioned, who is actually on Sylvia Sidney's side at the big party.
Yeah.
So...
Because she's abandoned by her husband, who wants her to fall on her face.
Yeah.
So we get another scene where, for their own manipulative purposes in each case, the sister and brother are dressing her up like a doll, be Indian or be not Indian.
Yeah. And she is just trying to navigate this. She accepts what the sister says because it confirms her initial suspicions that probably the thing to do in New York is dress in New York evening clothes.
Yeah.
And she comes down and she is beautiful, and immediately this deflates all of the things that everyone comes to the party ready to mock, and most of them either immediately realize that they're in the presence of someone that they can't really laugh at, or if they start to laugh at her, as that one guy does, she gets the better of him.
Another big fat joke.
It's true. She puts on an accent, a racial pantomime.
A Hollywood movie Indian accent, or broken English.
With the understanding of all the bystanders, except possibly this guy until the end, that this isn't how she normally talks. She's just doing it to throw it back in his face that he's a racist.
Oh, he's really vile. He starts going on about rouge on red skin.
Yeah, no, he deserves everything he gets, and she gives it to him.
Yeah, but in just a kind of ribbing way.
Yeah, she doesn't punch him.
She pokes
She doesn't need to. She's a complete social success here, and this just drives Gene Raymond into further depths of despair because
his family has won.
Yeah, he's lost out again. If you want to try to explain not any of this fucked up stuff he's doing to Sylvia Sidney, but why he doesn't want to sleep with her, he has just lost his fiancée.
Yeah, but also that's the only noble thing he does, that he doesn't try to get any sex out of this.
And also, maybe he's just too depressed.
He also could be wanting to annul the marriage after he gets his revenge.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, too.
Yeah. A lot of motives there for not sleeping with her.
He doesn't just keep this to himself. He tells Sylvia Sidney all about his plot at this point, because he's been foiled, he doesn't care anymore, and he doesn't seem to realize how much it's going to hurt her.
Well, like I said, even to have done this in the first place, he would have had to have completely dehumanized her.
Yeah, and this is just further proof of it. When she finds out what he's done, she obviously wants no part of him ever again, and stomps out of the party. After this great triumph, it's all for naught. She leaves with Monroe Owsley, who is much more interested in her than the evil sister.
He's already been flirting with her.
Yeah, he's not fazed by people being married, and here she's not even really married, so...
I don't know what her plan is here. Like,
she just wants to leave there.
I know, but sleeping with this guy, which is where it seems to be leading, because he's going to give her champagne, and she seems to be we know what happens when you get champagne for the first time. We've seen Ninotchka.
That's true.
And sleeping with this guy seems like a fate worse than death.
But it never comes to that because they're tracked down by the sister.
Yeah.
Who has threatened to kill him before, although I didn't take it that seriously at the party. But yes, it becomes a plot point. Because he is done with her, she reaches instinctively for a gun in his desk drawer and blows him away.
And then Sylvia Sidney's just like, you people have convinced me that life is not worth living.
Yeah, life, it's a terrible thing.
She pretty much says that.
She does, and she wants revenge at all costs.
Her revenge seems dubious. There's a little too many steps to this revenge. Too many emotional steps to it.
Well, I think it's premised on the correct insight that Gene Raymond actually does have human feelings.
He can access them again.
Well, he has told her that he does care about her, right? Before this.
Oh, right, but she
says, no, that's not good enough. You're an asshole.
Yeah, and she does, at that point, declare revenge on him.
She does have this knowledge that he's gained a little bit more insight into his actual feelings for her, which were always dormant and were being displaced by his demented Ahabian desire to overcome his family. So she does, I think, correctly assume this will really hurt him and maybe drive him to suicide as well if he finds out that this woman he has wronged is now going to be executed by the state.
Little Millie Teal type plot. I'll just give you the money in my will.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's totally that. And it's so many layers of crazy things going on here. It's such a complicated plot. So the sister seems like she's going to get off scot-free. She still wants to live, even though she has killed the man that she actually loves. And Sylvia Sidney, for reasons of her own, is going to step into the electric chair on her behalf.
Well, she has no family to go back to.
She probably could make a go of it somehow, but she just doesn't want to.
No, but there's no emotional attachment left for her, is what I'm saying.
No, definitely not. So she goes and confesses. And the police take down her confession and head off to the apartment to see if there's any truth to it. They find the dead man, and they're ready to accept her story. Meanwhile, Gene Raymond has gone after her, and everyone knows she was going to Monroe Owsley's apartment, so he shows up there too, finds the dead man, hears the police coming, hides out on the balcony, and he has an insight, or a news flash, when he hears them talking about how Sylvia Sidney is going to be tried for murder.
She did shoot him, obviously because he made a pass at her or something. Or, sorry, by which I mean attempted rape.
Yeah.
She wouldn't just shoot him for making a pass at her.
No.
She might yell and hit.
This is the last straw for him. He can't have this on his conscience as well after everything else he's done, so he decides he will lay down his life for hers.
I'm sure he figures this guy deserved to die, so he's,
Yeah, he doesn't feel too bad about this guy.
She can go back in society, that's fine.
So he confesses. He's on the scene, so that's probably something the police would accept.
Well, he has a motive. This is his wife. He has a better motive.
Yeah.
She hasn't even, presumably, even told him why she shot him? I don't know. We don't see it anyway.
No, we don't see it. So they take him in, and I guess this is probably only because... Well, no, you think it's only because he's a wealthy wasp that he gets special privileges, because he wants to talk to the other person that confessed.
I felt like, so this is like a Postman Always Rings Twice anticipation. Of course they're going to listen into this conversation between these two suspects. They don't know who killed the guy.
That's right. No, so this is actually decent police work here. So put the two people who are talking about the murder and let them talk, think that's in confidence, and then jot down everything they say. So they each talk about their reasons for confessing to this murder.
And who really did it.
It's an incredible scene because it actually solves all of the plot problems so neatly. They now have a reason to start over again with a
except
clean
for the
slate.
fact that I kept thinking they can't end this movie on the note of anybody going to the electric chair.
That's what's going to happen.
Because it's so fucking depressing.
That sister, who deserves, probably, morally, to be held responsible for a murder because she just about killed Anne Sheridan.
That's true. It would be better if the state did not have an electric chair, but also, if there was just, prison for life, although prison for life sucks too, so kind of thinking that maybe we'd be spared that image by having her take her death in her own hands, but then there'd be a suicide at the beginning and the end of the movie.
Well, we don't get any of that because the movie
It just
ends with them realizing that they love each other.
And fuck this sister.
The sister,
this awful sister,
is going to be claimed by the police, but no, we don't see any of that.
Maybe she can claim temporary insanity.
Well, we've seen that work before.
We
And
saw
she
that
was
work.
insane.
Wasn't that last episode?
Yeah, she definitely was temporarily insane.
Well, she
in
says
that
she
scene.
was.
She looked pretty temporarily insane.
She'll have a good lawyer.
Who knows what's going to happen with her, but our two protagonists are going to be okay. And I guess...
Was that last episode Kiss Before the Mirror? No, two
episodes ago. Yeah. I guess a nice side benefit is that if the daughter is arraigned and tried for murder, that's going to be a disgrace for the parents, too. So Gene
he's
Raymond...
finally won. As long as he doesn't have to kill his sister in the process, he's finally won.
That's Behold My Wife. Quite something.
Yeah, worth a viewing.
Yes, with all of the disclaimers that we included at the beginning, both of these films, I think, are worth a watch. Elise, next week...
Next week.
It's back to Setsuko Hara.
Great.
The Actourist Oeuvre Review. We're going to be talking about Tokyo Twilight.
Oh.
By Ozu.
Unusual Ozu? Ozu Noir. Did he do Dragnet Girl too, or is that someone else?
That's from the 30s, though, yeah. So yeah.
I haven't seen that, but it sounds really interesting.
Yeah, it does. And we were going to go see it at the Fox Theater. That was right before...
Oh, I knew that we had set up to watch that, and it never happened. Dragnet Girl.
It never got shown because COVID. And the other film is Daughters, Wives, and a Mother from 1960, directed by Narusa. This is a Narusa we have not seen.
Oh, that'll be interesting.
It's also got Hideko Takamine. So two of Narusa's favorite actresses working together in this one.
Excellent.
It's going to be interesting, I think. I hope that you'll be there with us 1 week from tonight.
Bye-bye.